those opinions are very dogmatic, because you're almost infringing on somebody's core belief system and how they've constructed reality using their intellect. So when you come in there and try to interject and throw a 180 on them, they might not take that too kindly. But how would you say is would be an effective way to, and I know that this book is a huge aspect of it, and this is, one way to do it, to maybe talk to people that might uphold those dogmatic beliefs and try to get them um, to think of things a little differently.
I think that the book is what I hope is a answer, and I hope it's effective for some people. But I think that there are multiple ways to go about it. Um, so I mean, this book is written for intellectuals. I'm an intellectual. I'm aware that not everybody is an intellectual, and to a lot of people, this book is not the most effective way of going about it. So, like for example, I really like the book Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, and I don't agree with everything he says, but I like his presentation. The graphs are amazing, and it moves me as a book. I'm like, wow, this is great. I am also aware that people will read that and be like, yeah, whatever, graphs, math, I believe what I believe. Like people aren't influenced by the same sort of approach. So, so I think there's more than one way to go about it. Well, how do you get someone to realize it? Well, I think broadly speaking, we would split it into two groups. So there's one, you're either going to go the realm of thinking about it, or you're going to go some other way. So if you're thinking about it, then then you're immediately sort of narrower. For me, that just falls right into the vein of sort of the Western uh, analytic philosophy. Because to me, I'm like, if you're thinking about something, why wouldn't you think about it super analytically? Like that, obviously, that's what you would do, but it doesn't work for everybody. So that's what I've tried to do in this book is to say, okay, analytically, let's do it. And one aspect of that would be talking about and just pointing out, and this would be somewhat simpler than obviously several hundred pages of linear argument, but just talking about that idea of like of meaning. Like there's no such thing as meaninglessness. If you're talking to me about it, you believe in meaning. Like just sort of pointing out the basics. Same thing with truth. Same thing with this idea of logos, of you are a patterned being. You have a certain order and pattern that's functional and that carries through time. And you are a being that recognizes, participates in, and creates patterns. So it is a little bit weird because we have lost the conception of what logos means. So you have to introduce that as well as show someone that they are it. But just that sort of straightforward level of going back to the very basics of the fact that you are, again, having that notion that you're seeing something real that you can pass on to me that you believe in the truth. You also believe in your capacity to notice the truth. And, and really, that's it by itself. That means there is a logos and you participate in it just by those basic factors. So I think that is sort of the general core of it. And then if the more people who think about it, they'll find different ways to sort of build off of that and to appeal in different ways, how to relate that and how to make that known to people. But it can even move into, you can use the mental approach with art, like just the fact that you notice. I mean, art in that sense is the same as landscape. Like the fact that you notice patterns in nature or patterns in art, the fact that there's significance there means that you are a thing that notices patterns, and that that is affected by patterns because you notice them, because you have the capacity to be aware of them. Um, and then someone else would be a better person to contact about the other ways to go about that through the mind, because I'm just very like shoehorned into like, this is my approach, this is what I understand, and then someone's going to come up with something off of that. I'm like, I've never would have thought of that. But then you have, okay, let's say we're not even going to take an intellectual approach. Um, there's a concept that I like, that has a name in Hindu, or whatever it is the Indian philosophy, Eastern philosophy world, is called darshan. And darshan means time, just like time spent with the master, time, the master's presence. And I think this is reflected also, we didn't have a word for it, but it's reflected in the Western tradition of discipleship, of in the ancient history up to uh, Christ's period, and even after that, people went and learned from a master. I mean, you could think of apprenticeship even as a slightly lower form of this, in our, at least in the way we think of it in our minds. But again, I'm going to explain it intellectually, but just the fact that we are patterned beings, we have a pattern about us, and we participate in pattern and we make pattern. If you go and you go with someone, you are saturating yourself in their pattern. And the more so, the more that you are intimate with them, the more you spend every moment of your life with them, you are being exposed to their pattern, and you are being suffused by their pattern, and you're feeling the them create and name patterns around them. So there's, again, I'm explaining this so it's intellectual, but I'm talking about something that's not intellectual, about just living and breathing next to somebody. You're going to inherit by osmosis this, whatever their pattern is, really, for the most part, but especially if you admire that person and they themselves are particularly uh, aware, not intellectually aware, but particularly expert at practicing, or let's just say living the logos life, like being logos, uh, then that is going to sort of exude from them stronger. And so the more you devote yourselves to them and the more you fall in line, then that is just going to permeate you and start to bring about that change in you. So I think broadly speaking, those are like the overall paths. You have the intellectual uh, assessment and dialectic and argumentation and trying to get people to understand things conceptually. And then you have the pattern of just sort of inheriting it by being surrounded by it and suffused by it. And that can break down into multiple different ways. Like, if you're more direct of apprenticeship, you inherit the pattern of a carpenter by apprenticing to a carpenter. You're not inheriting logos itself per se, but an aspect of logos is the ability to follow this particular pattern of becoming a carpenter or whatever it may be. So there can be more directly action-based things of like learning a particular skill. And then while you're learning that skill, subconsciously, again, we're not talking about intellectual, but there's a part of you that is learning the skill of learning skills. There's a part of you that's being developed along the lines of, as I'm learning, I am becoming a being who learns. And that presupposes the fact that you have the ability to recognize patterns and cultivate them and produce them and name them and that sort of stuff. So uh, I think there are actually a lot of ways to contract this. And really, the anomaly is the modern day, where for no discernible reason, people are very insistent on the fact that meaninglessness means anything, that we can't know anything, but they know that we can't know anything, that truth, like all these things are just nonsensical. And the fact that they're so prevalent and they're spreading, again, sort of like osmosis, um, is a vast abnormality. And for most of existence, we would go through our lives and just obviously take it for granted that we are uh, part of the world and also makers of the world, you might say.
Yeah, I think of, when we were talking about association, being around certain people and engaging in activities with them and having whatever it is that they're doing rub off on you. There's that old saying that, you're an accumulation, or you're of the five closest people to you.